Hello, it's Jamie. Are you ready for tips and tricks for the Yin-Yang handbag? Well, we're going to start with sewing the units together. So I've already cut the pattern and I've cut the batting loosely and I've pinned the two together. Right now I'm marking where the opening will be so that after we've sewn it we can turn it. I'm going to do this to all 4 units. You can see there that the right sides are together and they're placed on top of the batting. You have the 2 little dots on the pattern there, so that indicates where the pins should go or where the opening should be. You'll notice here that I actually pinned the fabric to the batting backwards. With this particular pattern, that does not matter. It's not going to hurt a thing, other than it's harder to see the dots. So next I'm going to stitch around the entire pattern, starting and stopping where I just put those pins where the dots were, leaving the opening. I'm doing a little test swatch here just to check my sewing machine to make sure everything is set up right and my bobbin is okay and all of those sewing things. It's always worth taking a few minutes just to make sure. I actually hadn't sewn for a while, so it's a good test. So I'm going to back stitch at the start and the stop, and I'm sewing 1/4 inch from the edge of the fabric. I'm going to speed this up a little bit so we can get to the next step. Okay, so now you will see me trim the batting, and um, this is why it doesn't pay to do a fancy trim job early on, because you're going to trim it really close to the stitch line without, of course, clipping any of the stitches. You can also choose to trim both the batting and the fabric to 1/8 of an inch, but I prefer this method where you trim the batting really close and then you clip the seams or you clip the curves. So when you're assembling this bag, there's a bit of bulk, and so you really want to reduce the bulk as much as possible. When you get to the opening here, I just estimate that 1/4 inch. I find if I lay it flat on a surface like this and then just turn the batting up and lay the scissors flat, that works the best. If you pick it up and clip it, or yeah, clip the batting, there is, I think, more of a chance of clipping into the seam or clipping the fabric. And once again, I'm going to speed this up for you. And here I am clipping the curves. So I tend to clip, the sharper the curve, the more clips, or the closer I put the clips. The straighter the curve, I spread them out just a little bit. And I'm clipping here with the batting side up. You may want to flip it over and clip where you're not looking at the batting. It's maybe a little bit easier to see the stitch line, and of course you don't want to clip into the stitch line. So try it both ways and see if you have a preference. And now I'm going to clip really, really fast, 20 times faster than I normally clip. So stay with me. Okay, now it's time to turn this inside out. Now, I've always used a hemostat, and I know there are lots of other turning tools on the market. However, because I've had a hemostat and I've always used it, I don't really know how the other ones will work. But as you can see, I stuck it in and clipped. I like because it locks, so I clipped the end, and now I'm pulling it inside out, and I'm doing it really gently because of course we don't have a really deep seam allowance, and I want to be careful not to accidentally pull too hard and open a seam. So sometimes it goes a little quicker than this, but sometimes it takes a while, especially if I haven't done it for a while. The first one is well, the first one looks like this. So there we go. And then once you get a hold of it, you can do the rest by hand. Still being gentle. And then I just run my fingers along the seams on the lower end, just to, from the inside out, just to kind of get them started so I can flatten the piece out. You'll be able to feel with your fingers if it needs more work. And the very tip is the hardest. I usually take a pin and scoop it out so that it's nice and rounded. And with the pin too, you want to be careful because again, you can pull too hard and damage the fabric. So easy does it. And now I am going to finger press this opening closed. You can of course use an iron. I found that finger pressing works well, and it's a little bit more forgiving than an iron. Although you can fix it if you've ironed it wrong too. But so I kind of roll it over the batting and then fold the other end under. I don't know if that makes sense, but you can kind of see. And then once I get it where I want it, I pin it. And then you can either hand sew or you can machine sew that closed. I prefer the look of the hand stitching just because you already, by the time this bag is finished, you already have 2 layers of stitching going over that area. And I just think it looks a little tidier. I just do a little whip stitch, which you'll see in a minute here. Okay, so here is how I close this by hand. And I'm not sure how good you're going to be able to see this, but basically it's just a simple whip stitch to close that up. And I just remove the pins as I go. Pretty straightforward. And of course not beginning and end. And I do this for all 4 pieces plus the gusset end. And guess what? I'm going to speed it up. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing that we did with the side units. We're going to do the gusset. And I like to mark where the start and stop points are on this with the width of my hand, just because that way I can get in there and get it turned quickly. Again, start and stop, or uh, I have no words. You want to back stitch at the beginning and the end here. And again, I'm stitching a 1/4 inch from the edge of the fabric. And once again, I'm going to speed it up. And all I have to do now is clip the corners and trim the batting just like I did with the other pieces. And we're going to do a little high-speed trimming here. Okay, now it's time to turn. And because the opening is bigger and it's a simpler piece, I don't use a hemostat for this, but you certainly could. I just scrunch it up and push it through. And the same thing goes for this one. Same tips and tricks as the last piece, so I am going to speed it up. Okay, now our units are all turned and closed, and now we're going to carefully stitch around all of the curves 1/4 inch from the edge, and you're going to start and stop where the pattern is marked where to start and stop. You don't do the entire unit. So here we go. Okay, so this part is not in the pattern, but what if you wanted to get a little more creative before you stitched that 1/4 inch border, 1/4 inch border strip? See, I have no words. Uh, you know what I mean, before you do the step we just did. So I was thinking you could do some free motion quilting or hand quilting. I'm just gonna try some stitching with black thread in the black lines. And like I say, this part is not in the pattern, but it certainly would be fun to play with. And you could also embroider. You could bead. I probably would bead at the very end after it's assembled, but I don't know, might work now too. I'm all about experimenting and trying new things. So uh, do what you like at this point. I'm going to speed this up and we will get on with this bag. So here I'm doing another thing that's not in the pattern, and it's similar to what I just did, except I'm sewing. I sewed the 1/4 inch borders stitches, and now I'm just continuing to sew toward the center, following the previous stitch line 1/4 inch. So I'm getting these 1/4 inch line. Um, I don't know what to call them. You can see them there, 1/4 inch. Let's just say line work. Um, I've not ever done this before. I just thought it'd be fun to see how it turned out and how it affected the bag. It obviously will make the sides a little stiffer. So, okay, next. So here I'm pinning the two side units, the light and the dark, together, and the pattern will show you where to mark, where to put the first pin, where to put the second pin. I like to again measure. We're actually creating that secret pocket here. So I like to measure the width of my hand. I have wide hands and I want to make sure that I can get my hand in that pocket easily. And now I am pinning, I'm feeling where the other piece, the edge of the other piece is, piece underneath, the dark piece, and I'm pinning that so that I know where to stitch. So right there you can see where the bottom piece is. There's where my hand goes. So I'm going to start the pin there and or start the pin, pin the pin, and start the stitching. How about that? Does that make sense? Now you can pin where you should stitch. You can also mark it with a chalk line or a disappearing marker, or you can just feel it with your finger and stitch. And after you've made a couple of them, you'll see that it's pretty easy to find it. Maybe it doesn't look easy on the video, but it's not too darn bad. Not too darn bad. Now you are starting to go through a number of layers here, and this is where I said trim that batting as tight as you can, because you don't want to, you don't want more bulk than you already have. And there is a stitch line already from when you outlined the single unit, and I'm stitching right on top of that. That's why I'm going slow. I'm stitching right on top of that previous stitch line. Okay, and now I'm going to stitch the top of the bag, the sides to itself. Basically, this is exactly what you did on the bottom of these two units, but it's much smaller. So I'm just pinning so I can tell where the edge of the piece underneath is, even though I can feel it. And I don't always pin it, honestly, when I do it, but the first time through, you might want to pin it like this, because then you can see visually where the pin goes in is where the edge of the other fabric underneath is. At least that's how I did it. So, and then of course you want to remove those pins before you stitch over them. Okay, so now we have one side of the bag done. And you can see on this dark side I did some extra stitching that's not part of the pattern. I just kind of, and there, just kind of, there. So there you can see the secret pocket. And no, I just did some 1/4 inch line stitching on that black piece just to see what would happen. I was playing and experimenting. Now for the gusset. So we're going to fold the gusset in half, and we are going to pin the center of the long side. And then we're going to fold the side in half and to find the center, and we're going to pin that. A little wonky pin job there, but there we go. All right, so then we match those two up, the two centers, and pin it. And my hand's in the way, but I'm going in right on that seam, right on the stitching that's there, the 1/4 inch, there we go. And then I'm just going to pin the gusset around the curve and go all the way up to the end, and then I'm going to pin the other side the same way. So I'm going to speed this up, but I'll show you when we get to the end. Okay, so last pin. So there you can see how it's pinned all the way around. Now you want to stitch with the outside of the bag up because you want to stitch on that same line that you already have there. That's a 1/4 inch from the edge. Otherwise you're going to have three stitch lines and it's going to look kind of messy. So you want to go slow and you want to stay on top of the existing line. And then every now and then I reach underneath just to make sure I'm not catching the fabric that I don't want to catch in that seam. I stop needle down to pull out the pins before I go over them. And even though I'm going slow in this process, I'm going to speed it up for you. Okay, now we have one side of the bag sewn to the gusset. Woohoo! And now we're going to do exact same thing for the other side. Measure halfway by folding it in half, mark it with the pin, and just repeat that process. And there we go. We have the gusset sewn in both sides. You can see this bag holds a fair amount of stuff. So the last thing we're going to do is put a tuck there in the top of the gusset. It's about an inch. And I usually tuck about an inch worth of fabric. What that does is it just helps keep the bag when it folds flat, or when it when it folds flat, or when you're using it, it helps the gussets to fold in and not stick out. So that's what I'm doing here. And you want to do it on both sides of the gusset, and then you are done. I just realized my shirt matches that orange in the bag. I didn't do it on purpose. Really, I didn't. I guess we're all just drawn to certain colors, so. That is it. Ta-da! The bag is done.